Now let's look at examples of advanced workflow configurations. You will have a chance to think about business requirements and how to solve them. Almost all of the solutions exemplified rely on apps from the Atlassian marketplace. Recall that apps can greatly extend native Jira functionality to satisfy complex business requirements. Different apps are available for cloud, server, and data center hosting options. Some apps are free and others are paid. We will not be mentioning apps by name since your requirements will differ and multiple vendors offer similar functionality. So be sure to check out the marketplace for the latest offerings and compare features. You can search apps in various ways, such as by highest rating, most popular, or staff picked, as well as by categories, like admin tools or just by name. Let's get started. Let's first review all of the elements. This diagram shows a portion of a dev workflow, where we see three statuses: to do, in progress, and in review. We also see various parts of transitions. There is a transition called start progress from to do to in progress. There's a condition on this transition that only the assignee or users in the developer's role can see and click it. Once it's clicked, there's a transition screen presented to the user, and a validator ensures that the due date and fixed version fields contain a value. If not, the transition's post functions are not executed and the issue does not progress to in progress. If validation passes, the default post functions are executed and an additional configured post function adds a comment, all linked issues, which use the blocked by link type to say that work has been started on this blocker issue. There is another transition called start review. There's a trigger configured on this transition. When a review is started in Crucible, the related Jira issue is automatically transitioned from in progress to in review. And finally, there's a step property configured on the in review status so that no one can edit while the code is being reviewed. And here is a portion of a human resources workflow. The HR team uses Jira to track onboarding user access requests. There is a transition called start progress from onboard to started. There's a condition on this transition that only users in the HR project role can see and click it. Once it's clicked, there's a transition screen presented to the user and a validator ensures that the employee ID, full name, and email contain a value. If not, the transition presents an error and stops processing. If it passes, there's a post function configured to create multiple subtasks and assign each issue to the resource owner during workflow transition. Resources are configured as project components. Each resource owner is configured as a component lead. To make the process even more efficient, you can customize the HR subtask workflow. You can add a post function there to close the parent issue automatically once all subtasks are resolved. When each subtask gets resolved one by one, a post function checks the status of sibling subtasks. If they are all resolved, then it can transition the parent issue automatically to done using the close transition on the parent. So now is your chance to think through business requirements one at a time and consider whether it might be met with a condition, validator, or post function on a transition, or perhaps even a workflow property. Here is our first requirement. What if you want to force the user to modify some field, the due date, while rescheduling a task using the reschedule transition? Do we need a condition, validator, or post function here? This requirement needs a validator because it must happen during the reschedule transition. Also, the user must change the field. This can be done with a field has been modified validator from a marketplace app. Let's take a look at the second requirement. After a ticket is closed, its duplicates should inherit the root cause and the final comments. This is useful for reporting purposes. We need a way to copy the value of one field to another between two related issues, such as an issue link, parent subtask, or Epic issues in Epic. In different requirements, we may need to copy fields within the same issue. Is this an example of using a condition, validator, post function. Don't be fooled by the word while, which might again imply the use of a validator. The point is that you want this action to happen after everything else has happened. The user must first enter the root cause and comment on the current issue before that information can be copied to its duplicate issues. So this is an example of using a post function, because it is happening after other processing has completed. Different solutions can be found in Marketplace to meet such needs, including the copy field value to subtasks from the parent, or copy field from parent to subtasks, copy field value to from linked issues, and copy value from field to field in same issue. Such post functions are also often used on the create transition of subtask workflows when a field value is dependent on the parent's value. And what if we wish to actually close those duplicates? We need a way to automatically transition linked issues. What would we need? Again, we need a post function. There are several solutions of post functions for Marketplace apps: transition issue, transition parent issue, and transition linked issues. Other use cases include transitioning all blocked by issues to in progress status when the blocks issue is resolved, or transitioning the parent issue to on hold when a subtask is placed on hold. You can also trigger a transition on the current issue to move it one step further in its own workflow. Here is another requirement. We shouldn't allow users to start working on an upgrade task until all of its prerequisites or other dependencies are completed. Should this be a condition, validator, or post function? What do we need to check? The solution requires a condition which, if not met, will not show the start progress transition at all. If it is not visible, then it cannot be used to start the work. So we need to add a workflow condition on the start progress transition which checks the status of the task's linked issues based on the issue type, link type, and selected statuses. If the criteria matches, then the transition will be available to the user, and if not, the transition will be hidden. There is a status of linked issues condition which can accomplish this. Our next requirement: allow only auditors to edit issues in the in review status. Should this be a condition, validator, or post function? It should be none of those. This is actually a good example of using a step property. Step properties can restrict certain actions in a certain status and only to certain people if desired. In this case, we want to restrict so that only the members of the auditors group should edit issues in the in review status. The step property would be configured as jira.permission.edit.group.1 equals auditors. What if the requirement is that only testers can create bugs in a particular project, but anyone else can create tasks? Can you add a condition on the create transition? This one is a little tricky. Remember that there is no condition on the create transition, and it is not possible to set issue creation permissions per issue type in Jira. The create issues permission in the permission scheme applies to all issue types in a project. However, we can satisfy this requirement by inserting a validator on the initial create transition of a workflow. Two different solutions are available from a Marketplace app. The validator users in field are not in a project role is suitable when we have a different workflows per issue type, or when we don't want to set different issue creation permissions in the same workflow. And the Boolean validator with math, date, time, or text string terms is suitable when we share a workflow among different issue types, and we want to set different issue creation permissions per issue type and project role in the same workflow. When tests fail, let's create new bugs automatically and link them to the original issue in order to streamline the QA process and enhance collaboration between testing and development teams. Which transition element do we need? Again, don't be fooled by the word when. This is not a validator, but a post function required because we need to do post-processing to create new issues in Jira. To achieve this, we can add the create a linked issue post function, which allows you to create new issues, copy fields from the original to the new issue, and connect them with an issue link. Such a post function can also create issues related to each other, such as creating subtasks or creating issues in an epic. Another requirement may come from purchasing. A request will require approval from management only if the price exceeds $10,000. Otherwise, there is no approval required, and we can go to the next step in the workflow process. What do we need to configure? In this case, we can use a condition that checks the value in the custom field purchase price. If the purchase price is greater than the required amount, then show they approve or reject transitions. Otherwise, do not show them and go to the next step in the workflow process. Another example is showing a special escalation transition if the priority is critical. These are examples of using field value conditions. Reporters should only be able to select a single component, for example design or security, when creating bugs, so that the right component lead can be assigned. How do we satisfy this requirement? This requirement suggests the use of a validator, since the user needs to do something while the transition is occurring. Normally, components is a multi-value system field, so the user could select multiple values during a transition, including the create transition. But this requirement says that he should select only one. This can be achieved with the field has a single value validator from a marketplace app. Another common requirement is that developers should only select a single version when resolving bugs. Fix version is likewise a multi-value system field, but the user can be forced to select only one value through the use of this validator. This requirement says that only the requester's manager can approve a change request, and that manager is listed on the request itself. Hence, it varies on an issue-by-issue basis. This is a conditional requirement. Only some people should be able to see and use the approved transition, so this needs a condition. We can accomplish this requirement with the user is in custom field condition from an app. Unless the user is listed in a particular custom field, either a single user picker or a group picker field, then they will not be able to see and therefore execute the approved transition. And you can also decide whether to allow only the user in the field or anyone except the user in the field. Here is our final example. Mark the fixed versions field as required, but only when the resolution is set to fixed during the transition. Remember that fields can be made required via the field configuration, but this will make them always required, whenever and wherever they appear on screens. Another way is to use a transition screen and a field's required validator, but this will make the field required always during that transition. But here we want to make the fixed versions field conditionally required during a transition only when the resolution is set to the value fixed. So we need to require a field based on the value populated in another field. How can we achieve this requirement? We solve that by using a server-side validator available through the behaviors functionality of a marketplace app. We can mark the fixed versions field as required, but only when the resolution is fixed, because it doesn't make sense to require a fixed version when the resolution is won't fix. Some examples of behaviors are the following. Hide or show a certain field based on the value populated in another field during the transition. Update the select list option based on the value of another custom field during the transition. And as we see here, make another field required based on the value populated in another field during the transition. And there are many other types of behaviors. That was our final advanced example of configuring transitions.